Ramokgopa to come and brief us. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Acting DG, and good morning to everyone. Let me take the opportunity once more to thank the members of the media and for making it possible for us to convey this update to the rest of the country. And also just to indicate that I'm joined by my colleagues from ESCOM, our colleagues from the technical arm of NICOM, so that we are able to illustrate that this is a collective initiative. It's an all South Africa approach to the resolution of the energy crisis in the country. Just a bit of update. The last time when we were together, I did indicate that we were going to go to Grootvlei at the time. Remember that Unit 2 at Grootvlei had experienced fire, so I had to go and familiarize myself with the degree or the extent of the damage there at Grootvlei. I was able to engage extensively with the management of Grootvlei, led by GM Tsepiso and her technical team, and just to say that I'm very grateful of the efforts that they've done. Just an illustration of the capability of the team to arrest a situation, if unattended to, was likely going to be catastrophic. And like I said, it was as a result of the spillage of fuel oil, which came into contact with high temperature surfaces, and that ignited the fire. And they were able to initiate immediately their disaster interventions, and they were able to put up the fire. The damage really was isolated to the cables. They need to replace about 8 to 10 kilometers of wiring there. And really it's about the controls and the instrumentation that was affected. And we are confident by the end of next week, we should be able to return the unit back to service. And I'm also happy to report that we didn't experience any injuries, no fatalities, and that is on account of the excellent work of the team at Grootvlei. And of course, the assurance is that going forward, they'll take all the necessary measures, and they are going to ensure that they examine all the components in all other units that gave rise to this, the leakage of fuel oil, to ensure that we avert an occurrence of a similar nature going forward. And then the second major announcement to make is that the Minister of Trade and Industry, Minister Patel, was able to launch what we call the one-stop center. Remember that the one-stop shop, the one-stop shop is meant to accelerate the connection of renewable energy projects into the grid. So essentially is a single point of entry for all the renewable energy projects, so that the project sponsors don't have to be all over the place. They don't have to go to DFFE when they seek environmental impact assessment approvals. They don't necessarily have to go to Water Affairs when they want to obtain water use licenses. They don't have to go to Department of Public Works and Infrastructure for purposes of getting access to land, providing for servitude. We are aggregating all of these function under a single window, bespoke to help to resolve the challenges that are experienced by project owners when they want to advance their project to the next gate of the project life cycle. So we're has been launched. Of course, we are also going to ensure that we exploit the existing provisions of the law, especially the Infrastructure Development Act, which already creates a single point of entry and aggregate all the major players in the infrastructure place to be under one roof, to be able to facilitate the acceleration of what gets to be called the strategic integrated projects. So we'll see to the degree that the one-stop shop can exploit and draw on those the existing capacity. We're going to ensure that there's significant alignment in that. So this is another way of just our commitment as government to ensure that we're able to accelerate the connection of renewable project or new generation capacity onto the grid. As promised, today's update will really be focused on the transmission side. I did make the point that the transmission challenges represent, if you like, a structural constraint to the degree to which we are able to bring on board new generation capacity, and I'll expand on that. But more significantly is to share with you the work that we are doing. We are doing immediately, and we are projecting to do into the future to ensure that we are able to address the constraints on the transmission side, and by definition, we should be able to resolve the issues that are associated with the challenges as a result of capacity that has been exhausted, or capacity that is needed for us to be able to have the kind of mix that is desired and help us in the decarbonization agenda, but also resolving the immediate and current problems that are facing us on the generation side. But as per tradition, we have a template just for me to share with you what has been the kind of progress and or lack of progress that we have registered on the generation side, because I think we shouldn't be lost to the fact that we have an existential problem that is confronting us, and that it's manifested in the extent to which we are unable to meet demand, what we call load shedding. And as indicated before, what we attempt to do in this briefing is to give you what the performance of the week that was, and we were able to surface a number of indicators. So I'm sharing with you the period from the 24th of July to the 28th of July. So what has been the experience on the generation side in relation to capacity that is available? So you see that it's averaging about 28,310 megawatts, and of course we had a peak during this week in question on the 25th of July, where we had capacity available to the tune of 29,376, and of course this available capacity is really a sum of a number of elements. The first one has to do with our planned outages. So if you reduce the planned outages, so it means that there's additional megawatts onto the grid, and that gets to be calculated as part of the totality of the capacity that is available. Just to put this into context, when we did our winter outlook, of course, Eskom generated that. I think the expectation was that to be able to meet the demand that is associated with winter at the rate at which we're performing, the energy availability factor, we wanted to keep this at about 2,500 megawatts. And of course, the improvement in the capacity available has made it possible for us to have what we call good maintenance, essentially ramp up planned maintenance. And you can see that it's sitting at, on average, the week that was, we're sitting at 3,660 megawatts. And then, in fact, on Friday, we had the highest of that period. That is the week that was of 4,126. So that represents, if you like, about 1,600 above what we had projected to be our planned outages for the period, for the winter period. So when the planned outages are up, it simply means that we're doing everything possible in an orchestrated fashion to ensure that we're able to maintain the units, and when they return, hopefully they'll be able to be a bit more enduring, resilient, and over time you'll see the aggregation of these efforts will help to improve the capacity available. And then our albatross still remains the unplanned capacity loss factor. Like I said before, this simply means that the units failed on their own. So it's as a result of a multiplicity of factors. But the principal reason, again, coming out of this week is the fact that the boiler tube leaks are a big contributor to the failure rate. And again, put this in the context of the winter outlook. We generated three scenarios. The best case scenario was that the unplanned capability loss factor will be about 15,000 megawatts, and the worst case scenario was that it will be 18,000 megawatts. Again, you can see we're just shy of 16,000 megawatts. It's an area that is receiving our attention. Like I said, the more we do plant maintenance, the better the prospects of us of undermining the increase in the capacity, the UCLF. And then the partial load losses simply means that the generating unit, of course, they are producing their own load, but they are not at the desired level. If you like, design capacity, and then you can see again, it's at 6,340. Again, we want to improve their efficiency, so they should be able to perform better, give us a significant amount of megawatts. So what this means is that we want to reduce the unplanned capability loss factor, the UCLF. We want to improve the performance of the unit by reducing the partial load losses. When you bring those together, they add to the available capacity, and it should be able to lift it up. So those are the indices that we are tracking. Those are the areas of attention to ensure that we are able to improve. And then, of course, the peak forecast, you can see that we are far away from the peak that we had projected for in terms of our winter outlook. The worst case scenario was making two major assumptions, that the unplanned capability loss factor will be at 18,000 megawatts plus, that peak demand will be at 34,000 megawatts, and that was going to plunge us into an intensified stages of load shedding. And as a result of these efforts, we have seen that we are keeping it at the maximum of stage 4 load shedding. Like I said before, load shedding is it's an unwelcome occurrence, but the more we're able to illustrate that there's gradual improvements, and of course an average person measures that the improvements in terms of the number of hours that your lights are on and off, and of course we use this measure of the stages of load shedding. So that's why we're trying to ensure that by all means we don't go beyond stage 4, and again we're looking forward to, I think, the subsequent weeks that we should be able to take it down. Of course, we are going to, there's a cold front, especially in the Gauteng area. I did say before that it accounts for a significant amount of the load, about 25% of the load. So I think it's something that is worrying, and you are expecting that the demand is going to surge, and then if the improvements in relation to available capacity does not match, if you like, those increases on the demand side, then the only corrective measure that we have is what we call load shedding. And I'm hopeful that we should be in a position to address that situation. The issue of outage slips, like I said before, when we had our best performance during June, the month of June really was an exceptional performance, a significant amount of consistency. Of course, we have since experienced significant reversals, but you can see on the numbers that again were on the upside. So when we were at that peak performance of June, the outage slips were sitting at about 1,300, and now as I speak to you, we are sitting at about 2,065. Again, it's an area that will require attention going forward, so that we are in a position to undermine, if you like, this outage slips, because it talks to the planning dispensation, it talks to our inability to make the necessary measures to ensure that when we make the promise that we'll return the units on time, we indeed keep to that promise. As they help me with the technical issues, our sincere apologies. Again, like I said, these are areas that are going to receive our attention going forward. Of course, I'm doing a summary in relation to what has been our performance. Remember that I said that going forward we are going to use the month of May as our baseline. So if you're on the generation side, on the baseline of May, we're sitting at about 27,410 megawatts. That was the baseline of May, and now when I'm speaking to you, like I said, we are at 28,000. Just a second.
Sorry.
It's technology, so it's not load shedding.
Sorry.
Okay, and thanks for that assistance. I do apologize for that, because the numbers are important for us to understand, so that we have an appreciation what's happening. So like I said, we are using the month of May as a baseline so that we are able to measure the kind of progression that we are making relative to the baseline over an extended period of time. So you can see that the period of July, on the generation side, we had improved by approximately 1,100 megawatts. I did say the last time that just to understand, put this into EAF performance, approximately 1 percentage point increase amounts to about 477 megawatts. So you can see here, if it's 1,100 megawatts of improvement, so you are talking about on average approximately about 3% improvements from the baseline to where we are. And for us is a tick. Of course, we want to exceed this performance by ensuring that we are very aggressive. The kind of improvements are significant going forward. And then on-planned maintenance, again, put this against the context of what was our winter outlook. I did say that in terms of that winter outlook, we wanted to keep planned maintenance at 2,500. The reason that we are able to lift it is because of improvements on your available capacity, and therefore it gives us an opportunity to take out additional units. And of course, you can see we are ramping it up. We are at 3,493 megawatts. Of course, you will ask the question, but why not exploit this, get out of winter? The point we are making is that it's a short-term pain and long-term gain. I think that's the point that we are making. Of course, all of us are suffering as a result of load shedding. But when we get to the situation when we say we are out of load shedding, it's important that we are able to give you the assurance that we are confident about these units being resilient, being able to carry us into the future. And you are undermining your outage slips, essentially units just tripping on their own without alerting you. And that's the kind of discipline that we are introducing into how we are treating this area of work. And of course, is led by Mr. Beki Ngumalo and his competent team of station managers and the men and women who are at the coalface of addressing the generation of giving us a generation capacity. Again, the unplanned capability loss factor, we want to bring it down. Again, put it into context. Case scenario was that we're going to be 15,000 megawatts or less. Of course, during the baseline, we're at 17,000, averaging that. Now in July, we're averaging about 15,700. Again, in terms of that trend line relative to the base, we're coming down, and for us, it's reassuring. And then on the partial load losses, so now I'm dismembering, granularizing, essentially those components that makes issues of available capacity. You can see the partial load losses. I say we want to make the units more efficient. Their generation capacity must approximate their installed capacity. And once you get at those levels, you are getting higher levels of efficiency. You are improving your energy availability factor. Again, the partial load losses, when they go down, is an excellent measure of, an indicator rather, of what is the performance of this unit. Of course, it's insignificant, like you see there, about 70 or so, 40 or so megawatts, but again, it's still a decline in the right direction. And PM peak is something that is out of our control. It's a function of the weather and the consumer attitude. Of course, we're doing everything possible. That's why we've been we're making interventions on the demand side. We will be sharing with you, I think, in the next iteration of this, the work that we are doing on the demand side, so that there's an appreciation that there's a concerted effort. Ourselves, of course, Eskom has been very active on mainstream media, encouraging users to ensure that we reduce demand. Of course, we are going to use innovations and technology to help us to connect better with communities and households so that we are able to manage consumption. I made the point around outage slips. This is one area that we are seeing significant movement. It almost halved from where we are, 3,476, we are at 1,843. So this talks to better planning, and I had the privilege of joining the generation team. They had their strategic workshop just to try further understand the nature of the problem and what are the kind of actions that needs to be taken on the generation side, on the short-term basis and long-term basis, and this area of outage sleep, which is a function of planning and management, has received extended attention in that conversation by the various station managers assembled in one team, of course led by Mr. Bekin Ngumalo. And you'll see it's one area where I'm confident we'll continue to see significant strides going into the future. So I thought that we must map the issues around generation. Now let me just gallop on the transmission side. Like I said, there's a multiplicity of areas that requires attention. So there's multiple fronts. So there's the issues of generation, and then of course there are issues of transmission. And the point I've been making consistently is that we can't kick the can down the road and think that will resolve transmission sometime in the future once we have sufficient generation. It's important that we are able to address this in parallel. So these are the twin challenges that are facing us at the moment. Of course, the issues of distribution down the value chain that must receive attention at the right point, of course, we'll share with you. But these are the twin challenges that should be addressed for us to be able to resolve the load shedding problem. The generation side, what I've been sharing with you, is principally on installed capacity. The transmission side is going to enable new generation capacity, especially the renewables, and is going to help us to have a healthy mix of generation sources in the country. So this is really the assets, the generation assets, as they put it. So you've got 7 grids over 9 provinces. You know, I like using the metaphor of the cars and the roads, because I think it's important that we democratize this conversation. We don't just talk alone as the so-called enlightened, the engineering experts. I think we must bring it closer to home so that there's an appreciation. So if you like, these are the major freeways that are conveying the electrons. The electrons in the metaphor of the cars, of the roads, is the roads, the national roads that are connecting one major province to another, one major city to the another. N1, the Limpopo, the N3, Gauteng taking you to Durban. The N4, Gauteng taking you to the northwest. So these are the major roads. These are high-speed roads. You attain speeds of 120 kilometers plus. They are wide. They've got multiple lanes. These are the freeways that are conveying, if you like, our cars. And in this instance, these are the freeways that are conveying our electrons. So we have the total of 33,217 kilometers of high voltage and extra high voltage. So if you like, the network of the grid is made up of 33,270. It's important, this figure, because I'm going to show you later the kind of extension of this network to enable us to take opportunities around the issues of renewable. And then you have 160,194 MVA of installed transformer capacity. Again, let me use the metaphor of the road. So transformers really, they get to move electricity from high voltage, which is the transmission line, these freeways, to low voltage. So they transform that into from high to low voltage, so that you are able to get the electricity there at home. So, I mean, if you were to use the metaphor of the car, I did say that you have these freeways, the cars are moving at high speeds, and that's where your transmission line. So that's where, and then the transformers, if you like, is your off-ramps. As you off-ramp on the road, on the N1, you off-ramp, and then there's a traffic, a speed attenuation measure. The one that reduces the speed, you are going to go into a traffic light or you are going to reach a stop sign. And that's why you are going to slow down your car. And then as you move into your local roads, you get what we call the speed humps. So think of transformers as you are when you off-ramp, you are off-ramps. You think of them as a stop sign. You think of them as traffic lights, and then you think of them as speed humps. They are slowing down the cars, and in this instance, they are slowing down the speed of the cars, these electrons, so that there's no huge amount of electricity that comes into a house because now the house will not be able to accommodate that. So that's what we're talking. So these are the transmission assets. And then we've got about 572 transformers and substations. And then we also have about 3,197 employees. This is important, the component of employees. They are a significant asset in helping us to expand the grid, because it talks about our capacity and the technical capacity that is sitting with, technical skills rather, that is sitting with Mr. Sokomoto Skiepers, who's leading the area of transmission in Eskom. So when we are going to lift this, I'm sure there's going to be a requirement for us to have additional technical capacity to help us to roll additional transmission line. And then there's a conversation. So what is it that we are trying to resolve? So what we are trying to resolve is that if you look at the map, I did show you the map of the transmission line, and then you ask the question, who are these people who want to connect onto this transmission line? So it's typically the new generation capacity. And this generation capacity is from the renewable energy sources, wind and solar PV. It's concentrated in the areas of the Western Cape and the Northern Cape for obvious reasons. What are those obvious reasons? The Western Cape, the coastline, and the Eastern Cape, they've got some of the best wind speeds. The highest quality of irradiation level in the country is located in the Northern Cape. And therefore, project sponsors, in order to derive optimum efficiency out of these technologies, they choose those locations. But those locations are not, there's no symmetry between those locations and where grid capacity is available. And that's why, as I speak to you, stand before you now, is that we have sufficient grid capacity essentially in 3 provinces. If you were to look at the number of applications to connect to the grid, of course we do accept that not all of these applications will come to fruition, will get to financial close, but it's an excellent indicator of the appetite of the market, of where they see the efficient the optimal location of these renewable energy sources. You can see KZN, huge capacity that is available because of the number of applications. They are lesser than the capacity available. And that's why the opportunity around gas, of course, you can have it at Kucha in the Eastern Cape, you can have it at Saldanha in the Western Cape, but the one in Richards Bay is the one that gives you the best opportunity, and best in this instance is measured relative to the capacity that is available to connect to the grid, because it will take us an inordinate amount of resources, both people and money, for us to be able to create additional grid capacity. And that's why you see that in all of the provinces, except these 3 that I've mentioned, KZN, Mpumalanga and Gauteng, that's where we have capacity. And then you can see in Gauteng there's no application for grid access. And it takes to what the market about renewable energy in the province called Gauteng, and I guess it's also in part as a result of the fact that you don't have a significant amount of real estate. So Gauteng accounts for 1.2% of the total land mass of the country, and therefore to have this big development of renewables, you are unlikely going to find sufficient space. Of course, it could be in private hands, and that's what explains the situation. But the biggest message here, we don't have a transmission capacity in the Western Cape and the Northern Cape. But the point is not to lament the situation. What are we doing about it? We'll return to what is it that we are doing about it. The first thing I had indicated was that if you were to look at the trend line, you need to improve, if you like, the lines by about 14,000 kilometers of new line over a period of time. So if you look at the past 10 years, what has happened is that Eskom has increased the lines by about 4,347 kilometers. So if you want to go to the next 10 years, like I said, you need 14,218 kilometers, and this amounts to about 218 kilometers of new line. And you can see that at its peak, we should be connecting about 2,700 kilometers of new line per annum. And when I was speaking to the experts here, Schomoto and his team, they were indicating that the historic high that we have registered is about 800 kilometers. And that talks to the capacity of the industry to help us to roll this infrastructure. So there's a lot of work that we must do. Outside the money being available, and I'll share with you what are the proportions and the scale of funding that is required. I did say that is significant. Outside that, you need to build industry capacity. Otherwise, we are going to be importing and importing. And I think the sense we have here is that you need, on the back of this crisis, on the back of see-through and certainty going to the future, you need to build sufficient industrial capacity. And in this way, you are resolving the unemployment question, but also you see the opportunities on the continent within the context of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, so that South Africa continues to be an industrial hub of the continent. Of course, we are losing that badge, that claim over a period of time. I think we have hemorrhaged or lost the industrial capacity, principally because you have an energy problem in the country. No one investing in a country where there's energy famine, there's no certainty of supply and also the quality of supply. And that's why I'm saying that what threatens the investability of this country in the immediate is the energy situation. And that's why the South African Reserve Bank makes the point when they release their results or decisions of the Monetary Policy Committee. They make the point that load shedding is a structural constraint, and that's why we need to provide sufficient attention to that. And then in terms of the MVA build, the transformers, again, you need a 600% increase in transmission infrastructure in the next 10 years. So what they've done over the past 10 years, what have we achieved? 19,060 MVA. The projection is that going into the future, we need a whopping 122,669 of MVA capacity for us to be able to meet the kind of ambition that we have. And that amounts to about a 600% increase in transmission infrastructure over the next 10 years. So that's significant. And of course, it presents its own